The evidence will prove that Kouri Richins murdered Eric for his money and to get a fresh start at life.
To this day, the medical examiner, the professional that's the head of declaring how people die in the state of Utah, has never been able to determine the manner of Eric Richins' death. The Richins family hired a private investigator, and they paid that investigator to spend every waking minute digging up as much dirt as he possibly could on Kouri Richins to try to implicate her in Eric's death.
A wife and children's book author accused of killing her husband for millions. Prosecutors say Kouri Richins killed to keep her lavish lifestyle, but her defense says that she's being framed by family. Plus, we have the dramatic body camera video of the defendant right after she hears her husband died. Is she believable? And Nick Reiner back in court pleading not guilty to killing his parents. The key takeaways from that California courtroom. Also, mom Marcee Gray testifying against her husband about her son's alarming behavior. Will that testimony tip the scales of justice? It's all right here on Opening Statements. Happy Tuesday and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host for this hour, Matt Johnson. Julie Grant, she's back tomorrow, just enjoying a couple days off. And just like an actual trial, this show gets you ready for the court day ahead. And it's time now for your daily docket.
You were aware that Colt was interested in school shooters?
Yes.
You knew he researched them online?
Yes.
You knew he followed them?
What do you mean by followed them?
Just was interested in them.
Sure.
Gathering research on them.
Yes.
And you did not share that information with Mr. Gray?
Probably not if we were not living together.
In Georgia, testimony resumes in the trial against Colin Gray. Court begins at 9 a.m. Eastern. Also 9 a.m. Eastern in Michigan, the state's case continues in the hidden murder of Dee Warner trial. And in Utah, the murder trial for Kouri Richins resumes this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. And that's where we begin. Day one of the trial brought emotional testimony and two very different versions of events. Prosecutors say that evidence shows Richins poisoned her husband Eric for millions of dollars in insurance money, while her defense says that she's innocent and the victim of vindictive in-laws. Here's a look back at day one.
Kouri Richins returns to the bedroom at about 3 o'clock a.m. She feels that Eric is cold. She nudges him. He does not respond. She sees that he is stiff and pale. His mouth is wide open. At 3:06 a.m., Kouri Richins unlocks her cell phone. She travels 243 feet beginning at 3:08 a.m. She unlocks her cell phone again at 3:10, 3:15, and twice at 3:19. At 3:21, Kouri Richins unlocks her cell phone and calls 911. Weeks before attempting to murder Eric Richins, Kouri Richins took out an insurance policy by fraud and forgery on Eric's life. And 2 weeks after Eric died, she submitted a fraudulent claim on yet another insurance policy. Almost a year after Eric Richins' death, when Kouri Richins knew the police were investigating her for his death, Kouri Richins published a children's book on how to deal with the loss of a parent. And she promoted that children's book on local television and local radio.
When Eric died, his Apple Watch was hanging on a charger, nice and neat. His phone was in a charger on the nightstand. He was lying in his underwear, like when you go to bed. And he was on his back on his side of the bed. So it appears pretty clear that Eric went to bed and fell asleep and died in his sleep. You're also going to hear that there was an empty pill bottle right next to him in his nightstand. And I want you to pay careful attention to this. The empty pill bottle expired in 2016. You're going to hear testimony that a medical examiner has the ability to declare the manner of someone's death. It can be homicide, it can be suicide, it can be accidental overdose, it can be murder, it can be anything. To this day, the medical examiner, the professional that's the head of declaring how people die in the state of Utah, has never been able to determine the manner of Eric Richins' death.
What, if anything, did Kouri Richins say to you?
You know, I don't recall her saying much of anything to me.
Did she?
When I came in and my daughter, Katie, told me that Eric was gone, they helped me onto the couch, and I don't ever recall of even talking to Kouri, to be quite honest with you.
Did there come a time later when Kouri Richins told you what caused Eric's death?
There was. She called me and said that she had just talked to the medical examiner, and they had determined that he died of the same thing Linda did, and COVID.
And Linda was your wife, right?
Linda was my wife, yes.
What, if anything, struck you about Kouri Richins telling you that Eric died of the same thing that Linda died of?
Well, as I said, I called my daughter, Katie. Katie, in turn, called the medical examiner, and they had never received a call from Kouri. They had not even released the results from it yet.
Here to discuss, we have attorneys Ben Chu and Rick Grundy and private investigator Manuel Gomez. All right, gentlemen, thank you for being with us on the program. Let's begin with you, Ben. Your overall thoughts, who won the day?
Good morning, Matt. Very good to be with you. I think the prosecution won that day. I thought the testimony of the father was quite jarring. The fact that she had not spoken to she had no information about the cause of death and yet lied to the father, I think that's very telling.
What do you think, Rick? Who won the day?
Well, I agree with the specifics that Ben just noted, but the other thing is this is any homicide case, you start off as the prosecutor in the lead because people want homicide cases to be solved. So regardless of whatever the instructions are that you get from the court, if you're the defendant, you've been indicted for homicide and you're sitting in that courtroom, you're behind the 8 ball, and it's the prosecution's job to keep you there, and I think they accomplished that yesterday.
And it sounds like, Manuel, that they used this defense, a private investigator, to find out those details that this jury is going to hear a lot about, including that pill bottle.
Well, I just want to say, kudos to the Richards family, because hiring a private investigator in a case like this is very important. It actually resolves many, many cases when it comes to murder cases, because private investigators can go on different aspects that law enforcement cannot. So I know that the private investigator in this case has uncovered such information that I know this is going to be, God willing, a slam dunk for the prosecutor.
Well, the defense doesn't agree, obviously, but, you're right. The Richens family on that side, on the prosecution side, also have their own investigators, and several family members took the stand, testifying in day one against Kouri Richins, including Eric's sister. Let's watch.
Eric was one of the most likable people. I'm sorry, guys. Okay.
There are tissues if you'd like.
Okay. So, he was one of... Sorry, I'm trying so hard. He was one of the most likable people you've ever met. So Eric was the kind of person that loved everyone. It did not matter who you were, where you came from, where he met you. Everyone thought they were his best friend. If you talked to him, they all said, I'm Eric's best friend, because that's the way Eric made you feel.
Rick, to you first for your reaction. I mean, a very strong start by the state there of Utah.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to start on that strong emotive state that you have to your advantage as the prosecution in a homicide case. You want to bring life to the victim in this case, And you do that by virtue of pictures and testimony of people who knew them the most and are suffering the greatest loss, and expose the jury to that. One other footnote I'd just like to make: not only do you want to, in a case like this, take the opportunity, if you have it, to hire a private investigator, hire Manuel Gomez. You'll be in good shape.
We agree here at opening statements as well. But Ben Chu, my next question is for you. You are no stranger to dueling narratives there in the courtroom. What do you make of this defense?
I think the defense has an uphill climb. I agree completely with Rick. They have done a wonderful and necessary job of humanizing the victim. The defense somehow has to do something to humanize the defendant here, and I think that's going to be extremely difficult.
Manuel, the expired pill bottle, though, and the no cause of death, I mean, I don't think that I knew those details, or at least didn't remember them, and this defense was really driving that point home. I think that they have a fighting chance here.
Well, I disagree with that, because on many of these murder cases, a lot of time the coroners don't have a cause of death. And it's still being worked out as the investigation goes on. But like Rick said, this prosecutor laid down a foundation that, to me, was rock solid. And the jury is going to find that Kouri's not a likable looking person. And I think that's going to weigh a lot in this case. But one of the main points that the prosecutor stated that stuck out, that's going to be a over the hill battle for the defense, is that she put life insurance policies. It was forged. No prosecutor in any state is going to get up and make the allegation that life insurance policies was forged unless they verified that those signatures were not correct. So there's no doubt in my mind that that jury is going to see she has no credibility.
At this point in time, I have no way of knowing which way you stand on this case. I'm just kidding. Manuel, so what are you watching for as the case progresses?
I'm watching for that the fact of this allegation of fentanyl comes out, and they showed that he had no drug problem. And I'm also watching for that the private detective in this case got that evidence showing the intent, for money.
Ben Chu, to you next. What are you watching for?
Well, again, I agree with Manuel. I think the life insurance forgery is incredibly damning. That combined with, we're presuming that he's right and that there's no evidence of any kind of drug problem, I think those two factors are going to be extremely damning to the defendant.
Okay, we have to end the discussion there, but Rick, we're going to get your answer on the other side of the break. Coming up, more coverage of the Kouri Richins trial.
When you discovered him, was he on the bed? Yes.
He was just laying on his side like normal.
Okay.
I just thought he was cold. It was cold in there, so I put the blanket on him.
Yeah.
His body just felt like heavy.
The dramatic body camera video right after she hears her husband has died. Plus, defendant Nick Reiner pleading not guilty. Will the death penalty still be on the table?
Hard all my life. I learned the secret to success is speaking in your authentic voice. And I bring that lesson to my show every morning.
Opening Statements with Julie Grant. Weekday mornings at 8, 7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Kouri has paraded around portraying herself as widow and victim while trying to profit from a book about his death. I never knew evil like this existed.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Upon entering the residence, they discovered the bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Reiner. Detectives from our Robbery Homicide Division Homicide Special Section immediately initiated a comprehensive investigation. The evidence gathered led to the arrest of their son, Nick Reiner, who was taken into custody later that night without incident in the Exposition Park section of our city.
Because at the appropriate time, the actual evidence involved in this case will be presented in a court of law.
The case against Nick Reiner is what's trending in true crime this morning as the 32-year-old pleads not guilty to the murder of his parents. On Monday, Reiner appeared in court with a shaved head and not wearing a suicide vest, which he wore during his first court appearance in December. Reiner's attorney entered his plea of not guilty on his behalf. He sat behind a plate glass in that LA courtroom. Although Reiner was mostly quiet in court, District Attorney Nathan Hochman did address the death penalty with the media.
We take the process in which we determine whether or not the death penalty should be sought extremely seriously, and it goes through a very rigorous process. We will be looking at all aggravating and mitigating circumstances, and we have invited defense counsel to present to us both in writing and orally in a meeting any arguments that they would like to make in consideration for our going forward or not going forward with the death penalty.
All right, next on the docket is scheduling preliminary hearing for April 29th. But will the death penalty remain on the table for this defendant? Let's bring in my guests here to discuss, Attorney Ben Chu and private investigator Manuel Gomez. Ben Chu, you first. The law, what do you think? California, they have that moratorium. Do you think that they're even going to shoot for the death penalty here?
Matt, I don't. And the reason I say that is twofold. One, as you know, they haven't had an actual execution since 2006, 20 years ago. And I think while you don't want to give special preference to celebrities or people who are powerful or rich, you don't want to be harsher on them either. So no person is above or below the law. And I think to make an exception in this case, just because of the parents were so beloved, I think it's not going to happen. Secondly, I think you have clearly the issue of mental incompetency here. And I think to go for the death penalty, you need a real premeditation. And I just don't think, there may have been some premeditation, but I just don't think you have the level of mens rea that's going to be necessary for a capital crime here.
Manuel, are you surprised that we don't have the official coroner's report, that there's no information out there of a possible motive yet?
No, like I said, this is not untypical in murder cases like this. It takes time for the coroners, and it's a compilation of the coroner's investigation with the detectives verifying the facts. And sometimes, instead of taking 2 or 3 weeks, it could take 2 or 3 months before they give an actual decision on if this was what was the cause of death and what happened. So this is not unnormal.
Yeah, you know, and Nathan Hochman has been very vocal about this case since the beginning. He has a few others, Menendez, and a few other cases as of recent as well. He loves the spotlight. But this is one of those cases where you have a celebrity factor, right? So, Ben, how does that play into it?
Well, again, it goes back to what we talked about the implications in the death penalty. I think he knows it's in the spotlight. He appears to relish the spotlight, and I think maybe that will induce him to keep the death penalty at least on the table as long as he can. But ultimately, I think it's not going to be a death case.
And on the other side, you know, also the first defense attorney who we know here on the program, Alan Jackson, he's no stranger to the spotlight either. And here's what he said to reporters after the initial arrest.
What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
Okay, so Ben, I really need you to decode the attorney speak here. What is he not saying, and what was he actually saying to you?
What he was saying to me, and I'd be interested in Manuel's interpretation of this, is that he lacked the mens rea to commit murder. Did he kill them? Yes, he killed them. He stabbed them to death in a heinous way. Did he intend to do it in pursuant to the definition of murder required for first degree or capital murder? No, I think he lacked I think what he's saying is that his then client lacked the capacity. And I think the public defender who's taken over the defense is going to make that argument, and I think she's going to prevail. I don't think he's going to be acquitted, but I think it's going to be a lesser degree of culpability and sentence because of his documented mental illness.
Manuel, do you agree, disagree? Decode the attorney speak there.
Well, first of all, I've been on numerous murder cases, and any time where a defense attorney right in the beginning leaves a bad taste in a jury's mouth because it gives an implication of guilt. Now, even though Alan Jackson so articulated that, no, print that he's innocent. No. If he was innocent, Alan Jackson, you would have stood there. He got paid $250,000. He stood there for 10 days, and he jumped ship because he knew this was the Titanic. He knew that this was a case unwinnable, and I think that's why he left this case.
So, Ben, final question. Do you think that this is even going to go to trial?
Great question. I think perhaps because of the celebrity factor and because you have a DA who likes the limelight, I think it probably will go to trial, and I think you're going to see a long prison sentence.
Gentlemen, thank you. We do have to take a break. Coming up next on Opening Statements, the dramatic body camera of defendant Kouri Richins, moments after hearing her husband had died. And the mom of the alleged Appalache High School shooter, Colt Gray, on the stand. Will her testimony tip the scales in her husband's trial?
You were aware that Colt was interested in school shooters?
Yes.
You knew he researched them online?
Yes.
You knew he followed them?
What do you mean by followed them?
Just was interested in them?
Sure.
Gathering research on them?
Yes.
And you did not share that information with Mr. Gray?
Probably not if we were not living together.
She met up with acquaintance 2 at a Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased from him 15 to 30 round green-blue pills, which she understood to be fentanyl.
1 or 2 pills might be accidental. 20 or 5 times the lethal dose is not accidental, Your Honor. That is someone who wants Eric dead.
This morning, we're spotlighting the murder trial for children's grief author Kouri Richins. The Utah mom faces a jury for allegedly killing her husband Eric by poisoning him with a fatal dose of fentanyl back in 2022. On Monday, jurors heard opening statements and the first witnesses. But it was the body camera footage of the defendant that grabbed everybody's attention.
He's had 2 Eppies, a Narcan. 2 Eppies, 1 Narcan. Blood sugar is 458.
You want to come out here?
No history. We have chest pain when he went to bed.
What's your first name? What's your first name? Yeah, let me talk to you out here for a second. Let them do their work in there. So what happened today? When you say we were fine, what time did you see him when he was alert?
We had a drink together at 9 to celebrate something at work tomorrow.
Okay.
We went to bed. I went to bed with my kids. He went to bed in our bed.
What time did you guys go to bed?
9:30.
9:30? Okay.
9:45.
And then what alerted you to him today, right now?
When I just woke up, when I sleep with my kids, I was wake up and I go back in my own bed. I just crawled over on his side.
And he was laying in bed? Okay.
He was on his back on the bed, and
Okay. And he was on, you said he was on his back? Okay. Where are your children now?
went to sleep in that room. 2 are awake with their ear to the door.
Day 2 begins later this morning. We'll have that extended version of the body cam footage in our next hour. But for now, let's break down the case evidence and what this means for the case. Still with us, here to discuss, attorneys Ben Chu and Rick Grundy. Rick, to you first. What do you make of that body camera video? Was she acting weird?
You know, how a person acts in a circumstance that's not going to happen to 99.9% of the public is always fodder from either side. But let me say, what's incredible about the video that we just saw from my perspective is, as a homicide prosecutor, that she was there for the amount of time that she was with the emergency crew actually working on her husband. And was her interaction appropriate or what you would expect under those circumstances? And then she was led away. Normally, that person is removed before any work goes on that person. What I did find interesting here, in addition to, you know, is this particular EMT or police officer going to say there were any tears involved with the crying? First thing she went to, what went on? And she goes to something being ingested. First thing, what went on this evening? We had a drink to celebrate something at work. So right away, she's putting what is likely a part of the murder weapon before the first police officer in a manner that seems inconsequential to her guilt. At least she feels so.
Okay, so let's expand on that, what you just said and your point, Rick. Of course, she's cloaked in the presumption of innocence, right? But just for analysis sake right here, if she's interacting with the decedent, Ben, and, you know, not being pulled away sooner, that helps her if she was trying to stage a scene, right? Because then you already know that she's touched the body, touched everything in the area.
That's a great point. And also Rick's point about ingesting the alcohol, it seemed a little off in light of the question what went on earlier tonight. I found, and again, you don't know how you would react in a situation like this, but I found the fact that she absolutely refused to make any eye contact at all and kept her face down and covered, I thought also was a tell of potential guilt here. I think most people would have been more distraught and would not have been covering their face the way she was.
Ding, ding, ding. That's exactly what I was thinking. And I was just telling the producers, man, we need to run this past a body language expert. But you know what? Speaking of holding her face, she did quite the opposite in court yesterday, day 1, especially with dear old sister-in-law was on the stand and on cross describing how she felt and why she was suspicious. Take a listen.
You felt it was important that this officer know that your sister-in-law had a motive? What was your reason for telling the officer that information?
I had an overwhelming feeling come over me that I should let someone know.
Why? What was your overwhelming feeling?
That I should let someone know.
Because you believed it was suspicious? The death?
Honestly, at that time, I had no idea what was going on. I just had an overwhelming feeling. I had just barely talked to my brother. He was fantastic. When I talked to him just a couple hours before, I had an overwhelming feeling I should tell someone about this, so I did.
So, Rick, how far is this conspiracy theory really going to go?
Well, you know, we saw a little clip when we were coming back in with respect to her purchasing fentanyl. I mean, that's the kind of thing that brings the whole train home. If that comes across to the jury and they find that that's 100% viable, credible testimony, That would seem to be the bow on the package to me, but there's a lot of little things out there. You know, something that seems rather minor, but in the opening statement clips that we saw, she's turning her phone on and off. She's locking and unlocking her phone. Everybody nowadays, even somebody who's been around as long as me, knows that that's done by the sophisticated cell phone user who does not want to be placed at a certain place at a certain time. So I think, you know, yes, there's a lot of bricks in the wall, but that's a big cinder block if they've got her purchasing fentanyl.
So, you know, we're beginning to see the defense strategy in their opening statement, Ben, and then also their style of cross-examination. What more are you expecting when we get to the defense case? Do you think that they'll put on a case?
I think they will put on a case. I don't think that Kouri Richins is going to testify, but I think they're going to try to...
She's going to take the stand. She's going to take the stand. No. Go on.
I thought you had a scoop for us.
No.
No, I think they are going to put on a case, and they're going to go on, you know, on the cause of death issue and try to make a lot of it. But I'm really with Rick. I think the fentanyl is just, you know, candles on the cake. How on earth can they explain that? The fact that she went right to the point about, oh, we had a drink. Well, that's how the fentanyl got in and killed him. I find her affect really creepy. I also think the fact that the sister talked about having a feeling, I think that resonates with the jury. You know, even though that seems like speculation, I think people know that sisters have a special connection with their brother. She was very affecting in her testimony, humanizing her brother. I just think it looks very, very bad for the defendant, both in terms of the hard evidence and also kind of the softer things that we all understand in terms of family dynamics.
Great legal analysis from you both. You have both tried many, many, many high-profile cases, some of which here on Court TV. I really appreciate your time today. Rick Reiner, you're going to be sticking around. Ben Chu, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Coming up next on Opening Statements.
Colt, he damaged a lot of things while he was there. Again, he was just, you could tell that he had a lot of anger and just yuck inside of him.
What did you think of her testimony, Mother of the Year Marcee Gray? Will it tip the scales for her estranged husband, Colin Gray?
Worked hard all my life. I learned the secret to success is speaking in your authentic voice. And I bring that lesson to my show every morning.
Opening Statements with Julie Grant. Weekday mornings at 8, 7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Kouri has paraded around portraying herself as widow and victim while trying to profit from a book about his death. I never knew evil like this existed.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I said, I'm not in your room, Colt. Just let me have the gun. I'm going to put it up for a little while. And he turned around and just kind of in one big sweeping motion kind of hit me with his arm / gun. But he hit me very hard enough that it knocked me backwards across the hall. And there's a bathroom directly across from his bedroom in the hall. And he knocked me into that door frame. I ended up hitting my head on the door frame and basically fell to the floor.
Now to what's tipping the scales in the state of Georgia. The father accused of giving his son a gun used in a school shooting on trial. Yesterday on Monday, the jury heard from his wife, Marcee Gray. She testified that the defendant was in denial over their son's mental health issues and told Colin Gray, the defendant, to lock up the guns.
He had a lot of anger inside, and he was very aggressive and unpredictable. Again, he was just, you could tell that he had a lot of anger and just yuck inside of him.
You said he damaged a lot of stuff. What kind of stuff did he damage?
All of the flat screen TVs that I had in the house. He broke several windows. He would take knives and make cuts on different things like walls and the leather in my car, the leather seats, just kind of like random damage. He wrote on a bunch of stuff, walls and that sort of thing. Honestly, that crossed my mind after I knew that they were having like active shooter stuff going on. I won't say that crossed my mind initially when I was reading the text and stuff. My mind didn't immediately go to the gun.
But eventually it did.
Sure.
And then at 11:32 that morning, you Google Appalache High School active shooter. And that's when it pops up that Georgia school is on lockdown.
Yes.
Reports of an active shooter. Is that right?
Yes, I had already tried to call the school multiple times and no one was answering. So then I tried calling my daughter's school, which was right there by the high school, and nobody was answering there. So that's when I Googled the.
And when you Googled it and found that there was an active shooter, you sent the defendant a text message at 11:34, and it says it's already on the news. At that point, did y'all know what had happened?
Yeah, I don't think you have to have a whole lot of sense to know what had happened at that point. I called him at one point to find out if he was at the school, if he had made it to the school or not. And he said, well, I didn't go to the school. I'm going to the house, or I'm at the house. And I said, why are you at the house? And he said, well, I said, you need to be at the school. You know, we have 2 other children. And he said he wanted to see if Colt's gun was at the house.
During that phone conversation, did he express any concern for Colt's well-being?
No.
It sounds like right before they were going to close the case out is when you had this positive test.
Yes.
Do you recall what you tested positive for?
Methamphetamine.
You're saying that you never touched the gun when it was in his room?
That day?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Because he was holding the gun.
You didn't go try and get the gun first?
I walked up behind him and I said, Colt, just give me the gun. And I had my hands out like this, but no, I did not reach for it or try to take it out of his hands. So I would not do that.
And I just want to be clear, you didn't go into his room first, try and get the gun, and then he took it away from you?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Colin Gray has pleaded not guilty to nearly 30 charges, including 2 counts, second-degree murder. So will his estranged wife's testimony tip the scales either way? Here to discuss, we have attorney Rick Grundy with us. What do you make of dear old mom's testimony there?
Well, despite her baggage, or maybe along with her baggage, she brings some fascinating insight into both the child and the defendant. With respect to the defendant, the fact that this is ongoing and he's of a mindset to go to the home, stay at the home, and check to see if his son's weapon is present in the home or not. Insight that I find fascinating and very harmful to the defendant. And then the fact that she, and to a certain extent, as a co-parent, they share a brain there, arguably based on their shared rearing of this child. Her thought and concern that morning was to get the gun away from him. Why wasn't that the same thought and concern of the father who had the child living with him. And I think in a larger bubble here, these are fascinating cases in the sense that 10 years ago, the law was the same, but this case would not have been brought. This is a case that's trying to move a social issue with respect to possession of guns, use of guns, and taking the culpability and the liability for criminal actions at the end of a gun to a extended party. So in this newer area of prosecutions for our culture, I think any witness such as this that can to some degree mirror the defendant and their thoughts transferred to the defendant is powerful.
And I think that a big part in whether or not she's going to tip the scales is if Marcee is believable. And one of the key things that she talked about yesterday was her husband's interaction before the school shooting with the son who's yet to go on trial. Let's listen.
There were multiple occasions where I tried to talk to him about it, and his initial reaction was always, well, what if there's nothing wrong with him? What if he's just messed up? What if he's just a piece of crap person?
So is she believable? Because if she is, she's going to help tip the scales for this prosecution. Rick?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't know if that was directed to me. Yeah, absolutely. So again, if we harken back to our conversation on the prior case, the prosecution starts out with the idea that this is our case to present, win or lose, okay? So she is now there, and I think to the extent that the jury has a leaning towards the prosecution, then she's credible. If they have a leaning towards the defense, less so. But despite the baggage that she has, I think what she has presented is buttressed by the prior testimony we've heard from others regarding the rearing of this kid and the father's involvement in his life and exposure to this weaponry.
Yeah, do you think that the defense will put on a case? Do you think that this defendant will choose to testify in his own defense? Only he can make that decision?
Yeah, so I'd like to say yes. I think, it's the kind of what would be helpful for him most can probably only come from him. But again, as in most of these size cases, I think if you do the math, the risk of far greater harm than good is likely. I do not think he will personally have the attributes to make a good witness for himself, although he is the person that could present the most helpful evidence.
If he does take the stand, does he have to attack Marcee? Does he have to attack his wife, who's not facing any charges? Rick?
Yeah, I think absolutely he has to take the burden of the fact that he was the custodial parent and try and shift it to her. One of the reasons why he may choose not to testify, because I think the evidence before the jury is credible that she was trying to have more of a connection with the child at this point in time after her failed drug test and having the kid taken away from her, and the father taking the full load of parenting and pushing her off.
Rick Rundy, thank you so much. We know you have to get to court, already taking phone calls at this hour. Thank you for being on the program. That's going to do it for opening statements.